Rick Hong here for Hollywood First Look. Today, I'm talking with the cast of Three Body Problem. Let's take a first look. Liam, I wanted to ask you just kind of like, how was it joining this and like just kind of wrapping your head around this story and the science behind it and playing this character, who's all for humanity, number one, but number two, you're also coming back, with D.B. Weiss and David Benioff, yes, and then add in an Alexander Wu.
The funny thing is I thought my time with David and Dan, glorious though it was, had come to an end. Had no idea what they were going to do next and whatever. And when you're searching for quality of that nature, it's thin on the ground. You say no to a lot of stuff because you've been spoiled with the beautiful stuff. So when this thing came around, it was a very, very easy yes. When the lads came round,
I got on board. I had a Zoom call with Dan and David and Alex. I'm instantly I'm very curious why three showrunners are involved in this project that I didn't know anything about. As soon as I dived into the books, I mean the science is dense in there, and the game's quite. I just had to go back and forth, and it's like, oh God, I hope I'm going to get this. And it was Sershin's a blessing for them to make their version and make it much more global story.
I definitely started with allowing the creators of the show to guide me and really help me to see the world that they were trying to adapt. Especially because my character, the person that he's based on, doesn't really appear until the second book anyway. So because of this being the first season, obviously, I had a lot of freedom to just have the beginnings of this character kind of develop naturally. And that gave me a lot of freedom to kind of, feel things out, figure out what worked and what didn't work for me, and really just get to play off naturally alongside my talented castmates.
Ultimately, this role, it's just, there's so much to do with it from the get-go that I just had to kind of dive nose in as soon as I started just becoming part of the show, because it was just so many questions to be asked, right? Like how paranoid is she? What the process is? What's the crescendo of that? How realistic do you want it? How sort of open world do you want it? Like there were so many things to address that I sort of just dug into the emotional journey that she was going to go through, and it didn't give me time to sort of self-consume in other things. And so I just sort of had to dive into what Dave and Dan and Alex were thinking and sort of doing a collaboration.
How was it being a part of this, kind of wrapping your head around this crazy science story, but also playing this woman who kind of has an issue with people?
You see, now that's interesting. I don't know if I think but it's interesting that that's how it came across. That she has an issue with people. I think she has an issue with betrayal. And as a result, she's very guarded. And so that was a journey that I have not taken quite to this extreme.
I am very grateful that I can play this part with Roz. And yes, we together build a complete arc. I throw the ball and she catches it so beautifully and made it so powerful in the end.
It's based on a book. There's a book series of 3, a Chinese book that 2 different guys had to translate. There's so much science. So I'm wondering just like how you just kind of started the whole thing or trying to understand the story. And Jess, I'm Rick Hong, so it's nice to see a family member.
Hey, Uncle, is that you?
Sure.
90% of the work was already done for us by the time we even arrived on the scene, because Dan and David, and then eventually Alex as well, they did the work of adapting this vast, huge scale story trilogy into a really beautiful, very complete story arc of humanity's dealing with this existential crisis, centered around this emotional core, which are the Oxford Five, who we play. So I think it's been, I think it's amazing what they've done to make it very relatable, to make people really want to invest in this story,
Especially working with David and Dan, again, although the Game of Thrones was a very different setting and a very different type of show in many ways. I still came into it very confident, knowing that not only us as a cast, but the show and the IP was in safe hands, really. They know exactly what they're doing when it comes to making relatable characters and finding the humanity, pockets of humanity in amongst these huge kind of existential problems. And yeah, I've been in sci-fi and fantasy shows before, but I've never played a character like this before in many ways. I've never played a character that's so confident and so self-assured and so comfortable with himself and his place in the world. So at the same time as being familiar with a lot of the technical aspects of it, I'm still being allowed to show aspects of my personality that I've never been allowed to or never been presented with the opportunity to before. So it was at the same time new and kind of treading old ground for me.
It was a real treat to play such a richly written, quiet hero. You know, he's very humble. He's very British in a lot of ways. And yeah, I was just fascinated by the psychology of his journey and how he kind of changes towards the end, and how he navigates the most terrifying thing that but also the most universal thing that we all have to navigate.
They are coming, and there's nothing you can do to stop them.